afternoon session, July 18th, 2018. Carla, could you please call the roll?
Saltzman?
Here.
Udaly?
Here.
Fritz? Fish? Wheeler?
Here. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of juggling today, and I'd like people to bear with us. It's summer, so we've had some absences and whatnot. And Commissioner Fish is excused this afternoon, but we need 4 people to vote on item 771, which is renaming ONI. So we're not going to disrespect folks who showed up to testify. We're going to do that program. We're going to hear the presentation. We're going to take public testimony, but we're going to have to hold off on the vote until Commissioner Fish can call in at 4 p.m. because we cannot vote on an emergency item with fewer than 4 city commissioners, just so you know what's going on. It's my understanding Commissioner Fish will be listening to the testimony while he is doing what he is currently doing, and then he'll be fully up to speed and available to vote with us at 4 p.m. So with that long preamble, could we please start with item 771, Carla?
Rename the Office of Neighborhood Involvement to the Office of Community and Civic Life.
Commissioner Daly.
Thank you, Mayor. This first item is an ordinance to formalize the Bureau's new name, Office of Community and Civic Life. Council action on this ordinance will authorize the Bureau to use the new name and allow the auditor to update city code to reflect the name change. I want to note there was a public process and years of feedback from the community that led us to this decision. What I learned from our process is that we are at an inflection point between past and future. We're deciding to move forward with a vision that is big enough to serve all Portlanders. We cannot achieve our mission to engage all Portlanders without neighborhood associations. In fact, I'm very excited to see partnerships and projects that are being developed with DCLs and neighborhood coalitions, as well as with Portland United Against Hate and Crime Prevention, which primarily work with neighborhood associations. This type of cross-collaboration is exactly what we hope to inspire and foster. Our Bureau has been the gateway, thank you, to civic engagement for the city of Portland for more than 4 decades. We need that gateway to be as wide and welcoming as possible, and that starts with a name that reflects our inclusive spirit and the scope of our work. Finally, I'd like to note that adding an emergency clause simply means that an ordinance will be effective immediately. There's precedent for this with other Bureau name changes because the intention is to reduce confusion internally and with the public. Unless my colleagues have the intention to halt the name change, I am requesting that we move decisively on this matter so that we can continue working on the areas where we still need meaningful public input, which is what item 772 is about. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our Bureau Director, Sukri.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. That chair is heavy. Is this a good position to be heard? Okay, wonderful.
Perfect.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to the ordinance. My name is Sukri, and I serve as Director for the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, hopefully soon to be Office of Community and Civic Life. We submit this ordinance with great respect for the previous work that has come before under the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. Indeed, our mission remains the same and is more clearly reflected in the name change, promoting a culture of civic engagement by connecting and supporting all Portlanders, working together and with government to build inclusive, safe, and livable neighborhoods and communities. A lot has changed since our founding in 1974, and we've learned much about our country, our city, and ourselves in the process. For example, it was a decade later after our founding in 1986 that our country began to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with a federal holiday. It was in 1987 that Oregon became the first in the nation to pass a statewide sanctuary law. It wasn't until 1990 that we passed the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it was 2007 when the City of Portland partnered with Multnomah County on the Youth Commission. And it was only 4 years ago, in 2014, that we won marriage equality statewide. So whenever we experience social progress, you see the circle of participation expanded for greater inclusion and possibility. For many of us, it is hard to imagine our society without such rights and protections, but the reality is that we have only relatively recently begun to implement equal access for all communities within government. And every time we widen the circle, do we not all gain something in the process? These advances were hard-earned over generations and continue to be threatened today. Today's headlines, for example, attest to the fact that we can take nothing for granted. Mayor and commissioners, isn't it our job to keep the doors of City Hall open to everyone? And even more so, isn't it our leadership role to open those doors even wider for communities whose participation is threatened by others who seek to make the circle smaller? This has turned out to be a meaningful moment to change the name of the Bureau. We need to see more acts from government expanding the offer of partnership to every community who seeks to engage. That is why we chose the word community for our name, to include all Portlanders. And community is a concept that is quite universal. It can be translated and is present in every culture and language. We chose civic to highlight our role in engaging the public with their government, because this relationship, people and their government, is a promise to fulfill as well as a debt to pay in this country. We are asking to become the Office of Community and Civic Life. We are intentionally not using acronyms, so please refer to the Bureau as Civic Life for short when necessary. Acronyms do not translate well into other languages, and more often than not, they reinforce a culture of insiders. So thank you for your consideration and for your leadership on behalf of all Portlanders.
Thank you.
So I think we just move on to the next item, and then we'll take public testimony on both? Does that?
Yeah, that'll
sound
work.
right?
Carla,
Okay.
uh-oh. I guess Mustafa, you're up.
We all panic when Carla disappears.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
she'll be back in a minute. Good. So what we'll do is we'll also read item 772. 772 is a non-emergency ordinance, so we'll move that to second after we're done reading that, and then we'll hold off on the vote on 771 until 4 p.m. when Commissioner Fish can join us.
Director Ree, you might just want to come back up to the table since I'm going to call you again.
Carla, could you, we're going to combine 771 and 772. Could you please also read 772? Thank you.
772, convene a code change committee to update City Code Chapter 3.96.
Very good, thank you. And is there anything else you wanted to add on that?
Oh, I've got an intro.
Commissioner Daly.
And yes.
So, this resolution authorizes the Bureau to convene a code change committee comprised of members that have a wide range of perspectives who will report back to Council with recommendations for updating Chapter 3.96. This committee will also be expected to engage members of the general public who are not on the committee before their council presentation. This resolution is the first step for the Bureau to achieve its goal of having a code that is representative of its full scope of programs, responsibilities, and constituencies. Director Ree is here to give additional background information and answer any council questions. After that, we'll have 3 panels of presenters who represent perspectives that are included and those that are not named but should be by the current code. So with that, I will turn it over once again to Director Ree. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. I'm still Sukri. So, we must always begin by recognizing the land that we are on, because before the city of Portland was built, these were the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. This is especially fitting in presenting this resolution because we seek to recognize the many communities who deserve and seek to be represented in our city code and charter. Currently, the purpose of Chapter 3.96 is to, quote, create a framework by which the people of the city of Portland may effectively participate in civic affairs and work to improve the livability and character of their neighborhoods in the city. We submit this resolution to convene a code change committee to recommend revisions to Chapter 3.96 for at least 3 critical reasons. The first is to reflect a unified set of culturally responsive practices for engaging a diverse range of community partners. The most important part of the purpose statement I just shared is the people of the city of Portland. And yet, many Portlanders do not see themselves in Chapter 3.96. At best, this is an unintended consequence of the way it was written. But after decades of working with communities in all the ways that they choose to identify and organize themselves, this can now be seen as a willful denial of all the contributions of all Portlanders. And at worst, when communities are not reflected in code, charter, policy, or law, this poses ethical questions for government in serving all its constituents. The second reason is to update the description of the Bureau's responsibilities. The Council, over the last 8 months, has received presentations from the Youth Commission, Disability Power PDX, New Portlanders, Portlanders United Against Hate, cannabis and liquor licensing programs, to name a few Bureau programs that have come before Council. These programs are currently represented in the code under Item M, Other Duties as Assigned. Updating the names of the programs is not what is important. It is who they represent and the social change that they represent that should be reflected. We sell ourselves short as a city that has accomplished great things when we refer to this work as other duties as assigned. A third reason to convene the Code Change Committee is to recommend a set of voluntary guidelines that represent best practices for civic engagement. Rather than serving as a visionary inspiration for civic engagement, Chapter 3.96 has more effectively become a set of prescribed practices that reflect the thinking of a different era. Parts of the code do not even reflect reality anymore, and other parts have become an impediment to community-led change, as you will hear in the testimony that follows. Revising the code serves the very practical function of setting the broader context for civic engagement for a diversifying and urbanizing Portland, and it allows us to fix some broken systems that are limiting the ability of groups to become more inclusive and equitable in their structures and functioning. We are joined by 8 presenters testifying on the resolution. The first panel is comprised of individuals from organizations named in Chapter 3.96. These are neighborhood associations, neighborhood coalitions, and business district associations. The second and third panels are comprised of individuals representing longstanding Bureau partners who are not represented in the code. These include partners from youth, disability, immigrant and refugee, and communities of color. Thank you again, Council, for your consideration and for your leadership on behalf of all Portlanders.
Thank you, Suk. And now I'd like to call the first panel. We have Olivia Alsept Ellis, former board member of Montavilla Neighborhood Association, Adam Lyons, Executive Director, Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods, and Heather Hole, Executive Director of Venture Portland.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, welcome everyone. Please state your name for the record and keep your testimony between 3 and 4 minutes.
My name is Olivia Louise Alsept Ellis. I am a neighborhood organizer. I was a delegate to the District Coalition of Southeast Uplift and a Montavilla Neighborhood Association board member for the last year. I'm here today to express interest and support for the Code Change Committee. In order to explain why I support this move, let me take a moment to describe the work that I've been able to accomplish as a neighborhood association organizer. While on the Montavilla Neighborhood Board, we developed a new code of conduct to include language which is proactively inclusive and safeguards targeted communities. In the winter months, when Mayor Ted Wheeler declared an emergency winter weather crisis, board members were able to open an emergency warming shelter in order to service our houseless neighbors. And most recently, we organized a housing and houselessness forum, partnering with houseless advocates like Right to Survive, Sisters of the Road, as well as local service providers and houseless neighbors themselves to discuss grassroots solutions. While I was a delegate to Southeast Uplift, I joined a committee to revise the mission statement for the coalition. In this committee, we intentionally threw out exclusive language that we felt limited the parameters of our partnerships. Instead, we chose a philosophy of inclusion, participation, and well-being that we felt better encapsulated both our work and our potential. I'm also a student of municipalism and participatory democracy. I currently organize with Participatory Budgeting Oregon as well, and in the spring we hosted an educational forum at the Rosewood Initiative. I was honored to see the room filled with a lot of energy, and I bring up all of these instances to show that as neighborhoods, we are already re-examining and adapting. Many of us are already asking ourselves how we can better become an open door that we claim to be. And it's not just the neighborhood associations that's having this kind of dialogue, but it's the entire city. How can we build the cooperative economies that we claim to love? How can we seat everyone at the table in decision making, not just in word, but in practice? Neighborhood associations have transformed municipal politics, and it was this transformative history that drew me here in the first place. So I think right now is a really exciting moment. It's one where we can reactivate that legacy and look to the future. May it be collaborative and one that supports the social and ecological well-being of all Portlanders. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm Adam Lyons from Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for taking the time for this testimony. I'm here to support the resolution to review Code 3.96. As a district coalition, we're pretty beholden to this code. And sometimes, as Suk indicated, it can be kind of restrictive and prescriptive. So as we build, oh God, what's up with this thing?
You're a little too close to it.
Too close,
About
too close, too far? Okay, great.
About 6 inches back.
All right. As we move to build more resilient and inclusive communities within the neighborhood system and outside of it, looking at this code is way overdue. Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods is excited by the efforts of the Office of Community Life, Community and Civic Life, I'll get that right soon, to assess and adapt to the needs of an evolving Portland. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is Heather Hale, and I'm the Executive Director of Venture Portland. As you know, Venture Portland is the support organization for the city's 50 neighborhood business districts. Together, they contain 19,200 businesses and provide 270,000 jobs. I know from the experience of changing my organization's name 7 years ago from the Alliance of Portland Neighborhood Business Associations, or APNBA, which just rolls right off the tongue, to Venture Portland, that change is never easy, especially when it impacts a city full of stakeholders. But words matter and names are important as they signify intention, purpose, and values. ONI's name transition to the Office of Community and Civic Life signals an intention to engage and include all Portlanders, a critical message that got lost with its common usage acronym. As our city continues to grow and wrestle with all of the resulting change growth brings, it is essential that all Portlanders feel as though they're reflected in this office. I'm also here as a partner with a vested interest in any proposed changes to Chapter 3.96. This code, last updated 13 years ago, no longer reflects the reality of the way neighborhoods, and particularly neighborhood business associations, function. As noted in the recent ONI audit, Venture Portland incentivizes governance and inclusion best practices in ways that are outside the code that is currently written, and I strongly recommend that we bring that code up to current standards and think about incentivizing the kinds of inclusionary practices that we would like to see in our neighborhoods through different activities. Finally, because neighborhood business districts are included in the code, although not in practice with the office, I would like to make sure that not only Venture Portland, but neighborhood business district leaders are included on any code change committee that is implemented. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, all three of you.
I want to thank you all for being here today, and thank you for your service to the city. I look forward to working with all of you, and I am particularly excited about the possibility of bringing our business associations back into collaboration with our neighborhood associations, because there's a lot of missed opportunities there. So thank you.
Great.
All right. Our next panel is Antonia McSwain, co-chair of Multnomah Youth Commission. Mila Vianney Perez Riviere, co-founder, Let It Pour, POC-led cross-disability community group, and Muse Alal, chairman of the Somali American Council of Oregon. Is Muse here? I haven't seen him. Oh, okay. Muse is not here. Please begin.
Hello, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Antonia McSwain. I'm 18 years old, and as you said, I'm co-chair of the Multnomah Youth Commission this upcoming year, and it will be my second year. I'm here to speak on the importance of convening a code change committee to update city code to reflect the Bureau's current responsibilities and to use language inclusive of all Portland's community members and ways of engaging with the city. The city has a responsibility to make sure all local policy is inclusive of everyone in the community. As elected officials, you have all made a promise to keep all people in mind when making policy. And when elected officials don't keep all identities in mind, they are further contributing to the history of this country being inclusive of only the majority they see fit. When the minority is left out of these life-shaping policies, it can create resentment directed toward the city as an institution, while also creating a problem for the folks not included in the policies legally. This dynamic does a disservice to underrepresented communities by denying them the ability to gain understanding of the city's inner workings and how they can engage to make our city a better place. Lack of inclusivity perpetuates discrimination and oppression of underrepresented communities. These issues can't be minimized. We see and face these challenges every day. All people, including youth, have the constitutional right to make change, but often youth of color are left simply critiquing local government versus having the ability to actually make a difference. When your community is not reflected, that just furthers the issue of misunderstanding and alienation. To actually make long-lasting change, every community deserves to be heard. I identify as a young Black female, 3 identities that are often overlooked in our society. Growing up, I was always proud of my identities, and that never changed, even when society told me otherwise. The only time I am dissatisfied with my identity as a youth of color is when adults tell me what they think is best for me, because they refuse to believe that I actually have the capacity to understand what is best for me. One can imagine how frustrating that is when adults make these assumptions and use those perspectives to make things like rules, policies, and laws. As a person living this life, only I can know what is best for me. That is why a code change committee is important. This will be a place where youth can shape the Office of Community and Civic Life's code. Youth leadership brings a perspective that is often overlooked based on adults not wanting to accept that we as young people see the mistakes others have made before us. Youth leaders change the course of history. Youth leaders have contributed greatly to many movements for change that have shaped this country and the world. Refer to the Civil Rights Movement or the protests against apartheid and the Vietnam War. It is important to have all voices present when making policies and city code. And it's especially important to have youth voice because adults in power tend to forget the struggle that youth actually face, while also totally forgetting that there are youth experiencing adult situations that even adults don't experience. Like the daughter of Diamond Reynolds, or the late Tamir Rice, or Ayanna Jones. Youth bring that unfiltered, straightforward, and honest voice to policies, which is a quality only youth have. Change is never ending, and so is youth involvement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Mila Vianney Perez Riviere. I'm one of the founders of Let It Pour, which is a POC-led cross-disability community group. And I'm here to speak, to relay the message that we all came up with for support for the resolution to create a commission on the City Code Chapter 3.96. Our community values diversity and a sense of community. In fact, these principles guide our interpersonal relationships and our social networks. We contend the contexts which foster a sense of community and diversity are not mutually inclusive. Rather, sometimes the inevitable tension both demands and intrinsically compels us to reach for radical acceptance where we have not been before, or because we are rooted in a fundamental philosophy of inclusiveness, we simply go with the flow. Respond to situations by coming to understand what the needs are in the given moment, and then to take action, to get creative, innovative, whatever that moment needs, whatever that person needs in that moment. In our view, it comes down to building trust. One way to start building trustful relationships, we feel, is to recognize who is in our greater community. Disabled people, including disabled people of color, are in the community, building cohesive social networks across disability lines and deconstructing particularly unhelpful silos. Now, we're ready to build and realize a more cohesive Portland. We believe and feel being recognized by our local government will foster more respect and dignity for our intersectional identities and lives. We believe in our developing a community that is merely not segregated, but rather one that is truly integrated. We believe the renaming indicates a reconceptualizing of the public sphere, and appreciate both the vision and wisdom to convene a body of Portlanders to assess and update City Code Chapter 3.96. We respectfully request Commissioner Fritz, who's not here, only in body, Commissioner Hugh Daly, Commissioner Saltzman, Commissioner Fish, who's reviewing and listening, hopefully, and of course, and foremost, our highly respected Mayor Ted Wheeler, without hesitation and full commitment to pass this resolution so the Office of Community and Civic Life Bureau may convene a commission to review and update City Code Chapter 3.96. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your testimony. The next panel is going to be Marcus Mundy, Executive Director from the Coalition of Communities of Color, Amanda Monjarez, Director of Advocacy for the Latino Network, and at some point we're going to be joined by Michelle Rodriguez from the Office of Community and Civic Life, who's going to speak to the immigrant refugee perspective since Musée was unable to join us. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Marcus Mundy, and I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition of Communities of Color, an almost 20-year-old alliance of 19 culturally specific, community-based organizations with representation from the African, African American, Asian, Latino, Native American, Pacific Islander, and Slavic communities. Dobre den. We engage in collective action for racial justice, efforts to improve outcomes for communities of color through policy analysis and advocacy, leadership development, and culturally appropriate data and research, including our former reports on Multnomah County and our hot off the presses report on Washington County, a research justice report called Leading with Race. Among other imperatives, our mission addresses socioeconomic disparities, institutional racism, and inequity of services experienced by our constituencies. We believe that this code change by the city takes steps to do just that. I was asked to speak about the broader communities of identity with respect to this change to Chapter 3.96 of the code and whether it reflects our priorities. You speak about inclusive, safe, and livable neighborhoods. We embrace all of those notions of community improvement. I know your system well and know the historical good your department has done, having been an organizational recipient of DCL, Diversity and Civic Leadership funding, when I led the Urban League, and that led to their development of their advocacy and civic engagement department, their incredible department. The city has also partnered with many of our members' organizations on both DCL work, neighborhood work, and Portland United Against Hate work. So we are strong embracers of this effort. I am further aware that some of the pitfalls and unintended consequences of your earlier neighborhood association structures that you're proposing changing were occasionally narrowly focused neighborhood associations serving the needs of just a few homeowners and others did not reflect the greater community need, which is why we are so heartened by the broadened and far more inclusive proposal of the code change and look forward to not just a name change, but a newer, more inclusive, and ultimately more responsive agenda serving all Portlanders, including those represented by our coalition. So thank you, Commissioner Udaley, for proposing, Director Reeve for moving this forward, and all you commissioners for listening and for your votes on this issue. And I look forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of the Commission. My name is Amanda Monjadas. I am the Advocacy Director at the Latino Network based here in Portland, Oregon. Latino Network is a Latino-led, Latino-serving organization working to positively transform the lives of Latino youth and families. To ensure our community has access to every opportunity to live healthy, happy lives here in Portland, we provide culturally specific services and leadership opportunities that empower our community members to participate meaningfully in decisions that affect their lives. We're excited to be here today to support the resolution and the renaming to the Office of Community and Civic Life. As a longstanding partner of the City of Portland, we recognize the importance of the work the city has undertaken to encourage all communities to participate in city government and to create inclusive policies and programs that help people of color feel welcomed, especially in this difficult time. At a time when our community feels like it's under attack by this administration, it's important to remember that language matters. How we communicate who we are and what we do matters. The proposed new name, Office of Community and Civic Life, better reflects what we are today and where we are headed. We transcend neighborhoods to be one diverse and inclusive community, vibrant and active in civic life. Latino Network has participated in the Diversity and Civic Leadership Program for the last decade. Along with our fellow DCL partners, we've trained hundreds of emerging leaders of color through our leadership programs on how to get civically engaged using culturally affirming practices. The first step is often familiarizing community members with government institutions and supporting them in seeing themselves as leaders with a valuable and important voice in our city. Once they build the confidence to advocate for the issues they care about, we see them using those skills to create positive change and to build lasting relationships across communities. I want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. We look forward to continuing our work with the Office of Community and Civic Life and are excited to see the new direction the office will take while honoring its commitments to community and to growing towards a more equitable and just Portland. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councilors. My name is Michelle Rodriguez. I am the Business Operations Supervisor for the soon-to-be Office of Community and Civic Life. In the absence of one of our speakers, I did not want us to miss the opportunity to highlight the importance of updating the Code 3.96 as it relates to the many Portlanders who identify as immigrants or refugees. As a daughter of immigrants who deeply believed in making the most of their opportunity in their new country, the United States, I learned civic engagement from an early age. We must take the opportunity now to make every stride possible to open the door of City Hall and all of the windows and every other way in which people come into this office to invite all Portlanders to participate in the decisions that impact their lives today and the many years to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And back to you for testimony.
Very good. So we are taking testimony then on both the emergency ordinance 771 as well as the resolution 772. If you're inspired by what you've heard and you'd like to testify, we welcome you to sign up with Carla over here. Carla, how many folks do we have signed up so far?
We have 9.
Very good. And if anybody else would like to testify, just see Carla over here. If you could call the first 3, please.
Thank you. First 3 are Sierra Connolly, Phil Sellinger, and Robert Schultz.
3 minutes, name for the record, please. We don't need your address. Let us know if you're a lobbyist. We read the full council rules this morning. They're still in effect. They just basically say be nice and respectful. You'll hear differences of opinion at the microphone from your own. That's okay. Why don't you start us off, sir? Thank you.
Sure. My name is Kieran Connolly, and I'm here today on behalf of the Northwest District Association. I'm the president of the Northwest District Association, and we're here today on item 771 and 772. First, I've been asked to convey that the Northwest District Association opposes the emergency motion to change the name of the Office of Neighborhood Involvement at this time because, one, it doesn't appear that there's any true emergency that requires changing. There's no threat to life or safety. But more fundamentally, we think that changing the name now, before we go through the public process that is expected to happen through this code change committee, puts the cart before the horse. We think that that it suggests foregone conclusions about the nature of what ought to happen at that code change committee that shouldn't happen until after that code change committee and the public outreach process that accompanies it has taken place. So the NWA urges the council not to change the Office of Neighborhood Involvement's name at this time until after that public outreach process concludes. Second, on the resolution to convene a code change committee, Northwest District Association simply wishes to participate in that process. We believe that we should be part of that as a neighborhood association. We think other neighborhood associations should be included. And we think that this, particularly for the Bureau charged with providing public outreach guidelines, that it ought to engage in what will later be looked at as an exemplary public outreach process as part of both forming, convening, and running that committee and coming up with the recommended code changes. And to that end, we just urge the council to engage in the best possible public process for that code change committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Phil Sellinger, and I presently also serve on the Northwest District Association Board and concur with the comments Kieran just made, although the comments I'm about to present are my own. I am also a past board president of Oregon Walks, at least under its former name, and want to use that by way of example to illustrate how some of the organizations that work hard in this city are topically based. They may be representing groups or important subjects. They work hard. And other organizations are locationally based. And being a retired planner, I tend to put things in a matrix where I put these locational organizations on one side of that matrix and these topical organizations across the other side of the matrix. And I would argue that one of those columns in the matrix needs to be other, because while there's many groups representing many needs and interests in the city, there are a lot of needs that come up in neighborhoods which only neighborhood associations can take on because they lack representation otherwise. Neighborhood associations tend to get into the details that some other organizations cannot handle. When PBOT wants to know about pedestrian needs in Northwest Portland, they're going to come to NWDA. When they want to know about regional policy or larger pedestrian issues, they would go to Oregon Walks. So there's an important role for both of these layers or dimensions of organizations, and there's a lot of collaboration that's important. So while personally I concur with the need for these revisions that broaden the field of representation, I also think it's important not to lose sight of the important role that neighborhood associations play that no other organization is able to play. They're not exclusive, but I would concede that they could work a little bit harder to be inclusive, but we're all volunteers, and the door is always open.
Could I ask you just a conceptual question? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you hit on an interesting theme, and it's one that I'm hearing a lot about, but I'm not actually reading it in the resolution. If I could just put a concern on the table, a concern people are expressing to me is they feel that the effectiveness of neighborhood associations are being diluted by this resolution. But truthfully, as I read the resolution, I don't see that. Could you help expound upon that theme and help me understand that argument and attach it specifically to the resolution?
I'll let Kieran take a shot.
I think at this point, it's more a fear of unknown that people are concerned about. Okay. And to the extent that neighborhood associations were formed, the NWDA, for example, I believe was formed before the Office of Neighborhood Involvement was formed. And it was in response to these grassroots organizations that the city formed. The Office of Neighborhood Involvement was to kind of formalize the interaction process. And I think there's a fear among some that to take the name neighborhood out of what was essentially the genesis of this thing is somehow disrespectful to the history that these volunteers have put in over the last 40 years. So I think that's part of it. I don't think that the fear is more, that there is a fear that is more coalesced than that, and I think that's why the emphasis of our comments is on a process and making sure that that process includes us as well as everybody else who's a stakeholder and is transparent and understandable in accordance with the city's standards on public process.
So you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, and again, I appreciate your testimony. Mm-hmm. It sounds to me like you were suggesting you could be persuaded that this is a both and conversation as opposed to an either or. Is that a fair interpretation of what you just said?
That's absolutely, I think, a true statement. I don't think that this is not a predecessor to ultimately opposing any change to the code by any stretch. This is what our board agreed to at our discussion just Monday evening, was that we opposed changing the name as an emergency measure after what, at least in our view, it was not an exemplary public process. And to doing so before what we anticipate being the true meat of the matter, which is revising the code to understand and adapt to modern needs and the changes that may need to happen.
And I appreciate that perspective. As I read through this, I very much read a both and I want to be just very clear for my own part. I have a tremendous amount of respect for neighborhood associations, both past and present, and not here, but in another city. I actually ran a neighborhood association. That was what I did for a job, and I was very proud of the work that we did on behalf of convening and bringing neighborhoods together. But as I read the resolution, and I've read it very, very carefully, my perspective on this, and I have not been engaged in the conversations or the community engagement, as I'm not the commissioner in charge, but the actual work product before me seems to be a both and. It seems to respect both the influence and the importance of neighborhood associations while trying to broaden that net to other kinds of community institutions. And as Heather said, and I was actually really happy to hear that, is there a way for the neighborhood associations and the business districts and others to coalesce and help represent the collective interests of a neighborhood? That's sort of what I'm reading into it. Am I missing something?
I would reinforce pretty much what you're saying. By the process should be fostering collaboration and referral of these different types of organizations to each other, because they all benefit by each other's input and influence.
Good. All right. And sorry to keep you and put you on the spot. You raised some interesting questions.
Well, I think to address your very narrow question, I don't think there's anything in the language of the resolution that we have any issue with. We're just here to urge a broad and transparent public process.
And participation. Great.
Right.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry for the extra grilling there. I won't charge you more for it. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello. I'm Robert Schultz. I'm father of 3. I live in Lentz, and I have this thing I wrote. I usually prefer to just talk, but we'll go with this. I'm currently the event planner for Lentz Fair. It's a local event built to bridge our diverse community through music, food, and craft goods. We see about 2,000 people at our event. I came to the event after being heavily involved in the cancer community. My son's a survivor, and in that community, when you go to an event, it's very open. There's a definite feel of community because we're all kind of going through the same thing. And I'd hoped to bring something like that to my neighborhood. And of course, that's how I became acquainted with the neighborhood association system and some of the systemic problems that are present. Last month in Lentz, 4 of our neighborhood association board members stepped down. That's over half of our board. They stepped down in the face of corruption, unethical conduct, both current and former board members, and they wanted basic things like transparency of the process of running a neighborhood association and accountability for board members, and they wanted inclusive outreach in Lentz. We're very diverse. We don't see that reflected in our neighborhood associations. I've now attended probably 10 different neighborhood associations, and I often film them for Open Signal Community Access Television, and you see this all often. You don't see a diverse representation in the neighborhood association systems. So though it sounds like I'm supporting the name change, I would like to see something more than a name change. I'd like to see something actually happen, because what happens, as in this case, the board steps down, there's zero accountability for the unethical conduct, the complaints get filed, they get escalated to the coalition office, they get brought to the attention of ONI, to commissioners, and nothing happens. The condition continues. And then we're saying, hey, let's bring diverse people into this system and include them when we're not actually supporting the system in place. That, to me, doesn't help us. It doesn't help my community, Lentz. We have 22,000 residents. We see 20 to 40 at a neighborhood association meeting. So my advocacy is almost to say step away from the neighborhood association altogether, or reinforce it with some accountability and some better rules. So I love the idea of changing the code to offer more power to the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, to express some just basic controls over the conduct that's happening in these small neighborhood associations. There's one neighborhood association that has literally 1 board member. That's not an accurate representation of our diverse communities across Portland. You have some very excellent ones that are well-funded, well-attended, have excellent volunteers, not singularly, but diversely across. I go to some of these meetings and there's 30 people there and there's 20 more people waiting to be part of that. That doesn't happen in Lentz, and nothing I've seen in this process has pushed for that to happen. Like there's no drive for accountability of board members for their conduct or to get more inclusion. There's no drive for that. So for my 2 cents, if that could be the focus, that's what I'd prefer. More than a name change and all the money spent there, spend the money on more local events, the local interactions, and bringing people in. So.
Great, thank you.
The next 3 are John Hollister, Mark Velke, and Laura Campos.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Really? Okay. My name's Laura Campos. I'm just representing myself. And, let's see, just to real quickly to answer your question, Ted Wheeler, the big difference is that the appeals to council are waived for neighborhood associations. So one concern is that if you eliminate the emphasis on neighborhood associations and you make it community-wise, are you going to offer the same waiver of fees to everyone? Can you do that feasibly? And if not, then the developers are going to be dancing a hula in the street because there's going to be less people able to appeal. Well, lighten your workload, but in the interest of community, that wouldn't be served. Anyway.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for NWDA, as I've been involved with Sweeney, Southwest Neighborhood Inc., and we often partner on a lot of events, and I find, in my opinion, NWDA is certainly our intellectual superior, but on this one, they dropped the ball, so I thought I'd fill that in. But what I want to testify about is when I graduated from college in the 70s, I moved to Portland to work for Mayor Goldschmidt, and I had the opportunity to write a book. That was the history of the Planning Commission. So in my book, I talked about land development, and I want to note that the Planning Commission is 100 years old. It was established in 1918. So it's kind of fitting, you know, that we're making new plans. My book was published in 1979, and I ran through the fact that, for instance, I found the Olmsted Plan, and they were animal trails that had been improved upon by Native people and then became more established when the Olmsted brothers came, and they had recommended in 1903 a plan, but it sat on the shelves and nobody found it until the 70s when I found it, because Goldschmidt fired somebody, and in those days they just, you went to lunch and the mayor would send somebody and they'd throw all your stuff in the hallway, and when you came back, you realized you were fired.
Halcyon days, right?
But for a historian, it was a great opportunity. This was a midden pile, and that's where I found the Olmsted Plan and the Bennett Plan, which had been forgotten. So I published in this book, and what I noted, I just want to read, the Portland area was inhabited by Indians for thousands of years before early white explorers first viewed the Willamette Valley in 1805. The arrival of Caucasians expanded short-term, self-interested planning, where one portion of the community benefited at the expense of another. Over a century before the Planning Commission existed, decisions were being made which would significantly affect the city in years to come. So it's been kind of a gradual process of, as I see it, going back to native ways of looking at the community. Is that my time up?
Why don't you take 20 more seconds and wrap up your thoughts? Sure.
So what we did in Sweeney with our equity committee, and we invited Danielle Rise there. For the last 3 years, we've been trying to convene with groups across the city and try to get a community-based. And so we think they would benefit from our 3 years of experimenting with it and suggestions we have. And one thing I just want to notice that when you know, as I said, you're going to have farmland, Indian land, farmland, and then it becomes single family, and then apartments, and that's where I ended it. But at these junctures, you have to create a balance. For instance, if the renters combine with homeowners to get improvements to their neighborhoods, there's going to be gentrification. The rents are going to go up, but then the landowners are going to benefit because their land value goes up. So somehow, I hope that, you know, not just a name change, but you're thinking about balancing those interests. Okay.
Yeah, and by the way, through Prosper Portland and the Housing Bureau and Planning and Sustainability and the Bureau of Development Services, we're actually very aggressively working on those kinds of strategies.
Yeah, I've been working with Cameron Harrington, and we did some code amendments, and I'm really impressed with that. But just as a Native person, you know, our treaties weren't respected, so, you know, we always bring that up.
Thank you. Commissioner Daly.
Mayor, I'd just like to address a concern raised by this testimony. So fee waivers for event permitting come from other bureaus, and our committee will make sure that neighborhood associations don't lose that benefit because we'll continue to support place-based advocacy and events.
Would you expand it to all community members if?
Well, that's what we're forming the committee for.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Yes.
It's good to see you.
My name's John Holster, and I can see I made one mistake already today. I shaved, and so...
oh, no. Oh, no. It's taken me 3 years to work on this. Don't diss me now.
So I heard earlier that there wasn't an emergency, and I actually think there is an emergency. And I think the emergency is like 20 years old that it's been an emergency. And for those of you that don't think it's an emergency, I challenge you to read my favorite book, The Color of Law. And you, Daly, you get an A on your book report for what you've been doing with that. I really appreciate it with the work that you're doing on that.
John, I want you to know that I'm going to start a book club and invite the whole city to read a book with me every couple of months. And the first book is going to be The Color of Law.
Excellent.
And I have the
So
complete annotated Hollister
Yes.
version in my
Got the
office.
Cliff Notes, everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks to John.
Yes. So, and actually, the how I came on the, and this is what I think that more should go on in this community, is how I came upon that book was because when I was involved in another group, there were two people that vehemently disagreed with my position, vehemently. And they even did some name calling. And so what I did was I go, boy, apparently I don't understand their perspective. So I called them up and I sat down with them, and they were so concerned I wanted to change their mind, and I didn't. I just wanted to understand their perspective. And they led me to the book. And had I just allowed myself to be in one end zone while they were in the other end zone, I would have never come across the book. So I owe them a great debt of gratitude. So the thing about inclusionary aspect of what this does is the report card of ONI in the past didn't get a real high mark on that. And I know you did a process, and I know the words are important, but I kind of said it's just a name change. That doesn't really do anything. And actually the resolution doesn't really do anything either. I mean, that's kind of a bad thing to say, but I equate the name change and the resolution into the world of sales, as we just signed a big partnership agreement, and we're all excited and people are having champagne that they got this done. And
Where's the champagne?
Well, actually, that gets from I'm a member of AA, so I don't do that part. So that's another part. Sparkling cider, and what all the work is done afterwards. It's people that have opposing opinions to get out of the end zone and move to the middle of the field and listen. There's no one here that I'm looking at that wants to do bad for Portland. And so let's work together. I challenge everyone here to call up your office, either call or write and say, hey, what can I do to help? Rather than spending so much energy about we shouldn't do a name change, we shouldn't do this. What are you going to do to help? And I'm speaking again today, so I've got a couple things more I want to say to Mr. Wheeler and to Mr. Saltzman. Thanks.
Thank you, appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to voice my opinion on this topic. My name is Mark Velke. I have to say this name change for ONI that should have gone through the proper public process instead of mostly being jammed through behind the scenes and voted on today basically after the fact is total nonsense. This has been a complete waste of time and taxpayer dollars. Instead, ONI should have been working on the issues brought up in the scathing city auditor's report. I, as a voting citizen, was not born last night on the Midwatch, and changing the name of a very troubled city bureau is not fooling me at all. Now, as far as I know, the rest of the government in this country is based on geographic representation, like our current neighborhood associations, for example, not groups of identity like ONI wants to change to. And if I use ONI's logic about the group I most identify with, which is retired submarine sailors who happen to be car enthusiasts and own a Lotus and a DeLorean, I'm pretty sure that I'm the only one in my group of identity. Okay, so does that mean that I, as one person, have just as much say in what is going on in this city as, for example, the over 6,500 people in my neighborhood association? I would hope not. Also, I'm pretty sure ONI has not thought this all the way through. What do they plan to do when a group of identity they disapprove of requests recognition and support? Refusing to recognize and support that group could result in legal action against the city. I have provided each of you with the current issue of the Northwest Examiner, and I would strongly recommend you read, if you haven't already done so, the article above the fold on page 1 and the editorial on page 3 before taking a vote today. I want to be clear. What I'm asking for is for groups of identity to participate in their own already established neighborhood associations and not create a whole new bureaucracy that we don't need. So please vote no on this ridiculous name change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if
Commissioner
I may,
Daly.
I just want to reiterate that there was absolutely nothing wrong with the process we've gone through, that there was months of public engagement, and we are here today to formalize that process. And I'm just curious, as a submarine, I can't remember, you know, how you described yourself. It was funny, but it was also incredibly dismissive and disrespectful to the communities that we're talking about here today, which are communities of color, immigrants and refugees, people with disabilities, and youth. I've heard as a renter that maybe I shouldn't have voting rights in my neighborhood association because I'm not a property owner. I'm not going to paint all neighborhood associations with the same brush because I know some of them are doing incredible work and they're progressive, positive partners with the city, but it is really unrealistic to think that they are going to be able to transform their organizations and open their doors to meaningfully include marginalized populations. And I'm just wondering, how are your needs not being met as a submarine operator and a car enthusiast? Because this is what this is about. The general public does not understand the unique challenges and barriers that marginalized communities experience, and therefore they're not serving their needs, they're not including them. How are your needs not being met?
Well, my neighborhood association is very inclusive.
How are your needs not being met as a submarine operator and car enthusiast?
I didn't say my needs weren't being met.
Okay, well, you just implied that your needs are as relevant and important as the needs of sizable marginalized communities.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay, well.
What I said is, you know, a neighborhood association that has 6,500 people, in my view, should have a whole lot more say in what's going on in this city than I do as one person in my small little group.
Okay,
so that was the exact opposite of what you thought.
As I think you mentioned, we've been very focused on the audit and correcting the issues called out by the audit, one of which was that we were not serving these communities adequately. So thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Next three, please, Carla.
Are Cal Toff, Nick Clark, and Roger Leachman. And then there's two more after them.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Ms. Udley, I don't agree with your comments at all.
It's Udaly.
To Mark.
Commissioner Udaly.
Commissioner Udaly.
Please state your name
I'm
for the
Dr.
record.
Toft, maybe you can call me that. You know, let's be real formal if we like.
Yeah.
I don't think many people here appreciated the way you took that on.
All right, let's all just stick to the testimony. That's all. I remember I said up front.
My name's Cal Todd. I'm sorry.
Sorry, sir. Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
My name is Cal Toth. I'm the secretary of the GHFL. I'm speaking as a member of the Goose Hollow neighborhood and as a resident. I'm a professional engineer, have a long-time career in the high-tech industry and with universities, a few of them anyway. I'm in general agreement that changes in ONI are needed. Here are some of my observations. But changing the name of ONI, I think, is premature. I think cynicism is building in the neighborhoods from the way the processes have been unfolded and reported. I think transparency and consensus is missing. I don't believe there's been nearly enough discussion, although the last few people did talk about land use related issues, zoning, impacts on neighborhoods and sustainability. In my experience, capable organizations learn from their customers, stakeholders, and the mistakes they make. They systematically make adjustments, okay, to how to reorganize perhaps their organizations, their processes, their policies, practices related to the identified problems. I haven't seen that. I do not believe that consultations with the associations and neighborhoods have been nearly enough. That's another observation. I encourage City Council to defer making a name change until some of these problems are addressed in a more open way. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. How are you today?
Well, thank you. My name is Nick Clark. My major concern is that is whether the renaming of the Office of Neighborhood Involvement will strengthen or weaken the relationship between the City of Portland and the neighborhoods. If you decide to support this change, how will the City Council ensure that the neighborhoods will continue to get the support that they need? I served as Vice President and Secretary of the Goose Hollow Foothills League, was a board member of the Neighbors West Northwest, and have lived in Portland all of my life. Here's a picture of me in the 70s. I've been volunteering since I was 3. This is during planting trees in Northwest Portland on 23rd. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. I've witnessed a wide range of community involvement, including parades, cleanups, the Central City Plan, voting on critical issues, grants, parking, livability, the vision of the new reservoir. Generally, this neighborhood forum has provided me with a greater respect for what a large role it plays in the character of the city, its safety included. Many of the issues and subject matter that we tackled involve the assistance with records, resources, counter views, strategy, insight, and answers to complex questions, historic data, prioritizing our focus and balance, all of which would have been much more difficult and burdensome had it not rested on the coalition staff, Neighbors West Northwest. Most of all, I learned a great value about the public process. I applaud the coalition for their time and knowledge and the management that they've provided us. I think that I haven't heard anything about the coalitions around the city of Portland and the neighborhoods that serve them today. The city treasures its neighborhoods and the coalitions that support them, I know. CES Wood once wrote that good citizens are the riches of the city. To add to this, good citizens need neighborhoods where they may flourish. I trust that you will ensure that we continue to be a neighborhood-driven city that seeks input from the citizens, not just the ones with the loudest chirps and caws, but those who add to our character. Even here today, I've learned much about the needs of underrepresented populations, and I think it's necessary that we do change the code. Personally, I don't know if the name change is going to affect that, and that was really my main concern, whether the relationship with the neighborhoods is and the city of Portland is going to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Roger Leachman. I serve on the board of the Goose Hollow Foothills League, the board of the Neighbors West Northwest Coalition, and on the ONI BAC. I'm speaking here for myself as a citizen. And I can I would also say that I won't repeat the arguments of the two representatives from NWDA, our neighboring neighborhood association, because they're quite true and quite eloquent, and that they speak to the main problem here, which is the process, rather the lack of process. Now, as my friend Stan Pinkin, president of the Pearl, emailed me Monday as he was flying off to Canada, this whole thing is ridiculous, referring to the name change without process. I'm sure that was also the reaction of the unnamed taxpayer who complained in February, stop wasting time and money on a name change. Assuming he or she has since learned that $25,000 of taxpayer money went to a PR firm connected to the commissioner in charge of ONI in order to produce some spiffy, fluffery, and puffery. Here, blank pages, your own moleskin, courtesy of your tax dollars, and I'll come back to this one later. $25,000 would have bought a whole lot of public process, a convening of a citywide meeting for neighborhood associations and interested and affected parties. I suggested that to the director months ago. Talk about what ONI's direction should be. I'm all for inclusiveness. We are an inclusive neighborhood association. Not considered, not happening. Why? Because I would say, despite the rhetoric here, there is a complete disconnect with, and I would say also expressed, contempt for grassroots democracy on the part of this Bureau. This puffery actually uses the phrase, power for and from the people. Well, no, not if you are a member of a Portland Neighborhood Association. The city's official practice through ONI is to disenfranchise its own citizens. They can't act, only a board can, and hardly anything is more calculated to destroy participation and involvement. That's what happens in a lot of neighborhood associations that I'm aware of. That didn't happen in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I was one of the founding members of my association. This is not power for the people, nor is it letting power come from them. In 2005, a neighborhood leader asked if this were a system of grassroots involvement or part of a city bureaucracy. ONI has answered that it is the latter. They want it that way, they like it that way, because actual power for the people could mean the bureaucracy could not control them and the terms of participation. And that has been exemplified by the fraudulent process that has brought us, the no process that's brought us here today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
My time's up, so I'll have to stop there.
Thank you. Next three, please. Commissioner Daly, did you have a comment? Next three, please.
Oh, I thought
The
you were
last
done.
two are Charles Bridge Crane Johnson and Cora Crescent.
I want to bring Silk back up.
It's a good idea. Good afternoon.
Hello. I'm actually the second. Does it matter what order
Doesn't
we go
matter.
into?
Doesn't matter.
All right. My name is Cora Christine. I'm currently a graduate student at Portland State University, the daughter to a Peruvian immigrant, and I just wanted to share some of my opinions. I'm a renter, and I live 6 blocks from here, and I have rented in this neighborhood, and I don't feel any less valued in my neighborhood. So to start off, I wanted to say that I hear a huge focus on people of color, immigrants, and marginalized communities, and the engagement from government to those communities. But I have to say, when coming here, I felt marginalized. I feel like this decision has already been made, and the same people who are critiquing our federal government for not including the people and the communities, I feel as though I walked in here and the decision has already been made, much like the people in our federal government. I feel quite powerless as a student who lives here in my own neighborhood. I think this is also not an emergency, and to pass something so fast is exactly what our federal government is doing. They're not letting the people have time and proper notice, and are we going to be any better than them if we do the same thing? I feel like we're sending out two different messages. And also, I want to know if you guys have heard about The grant to Portland Police Bureau from 2014, WYBX004, granted a few $1 million for these same messages and these same goals. A lot of them overlap, and I just want to know if you guys are considering those millions of dollars being poured in and how we can work with the funds already being brought to us and given to us. And we don't have to be like the federal government. This is a chance. We can start this right by having the people that we say that you want to include, but I feel just as powerless as someone. I don't feel like I have a voice, and that's the message that we're sending when we have these meetings so fast. You know, I'm dressed like this because I didn't know this was going to happen way in advance, and the meeting got changed to 10, and then I got switched back to 2, and there was very little transparency. And I just don't think we should keep repeating the history. We have a chance to start this off right. We should have this starting right with full inclusion of people, with a proper notice, and doing this each step at a time, not in a rushed emergency. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let me ask you a question, and it's, again, I'm somewhat arm's length from the process itself, but let me get to the resolution, because my question today is really about, do I support the resolution or not? And as I'd indicated, I was somewhat prompted by some of the prior testimony and concerns that were expressed. I thought they did a really good job of expressing concern about the unknown and where the resolution leads and what kind of specific policies will be brought back to the council, presumably for final approval, and what the inclusion process will look like. The resolution itself, as I read it, is, to me, to my eye, it's pretty straightforward. And the categories listed in there are categories that, as I read it, they make good sense to me in terms of inclusion. Would you feel more comfortable knowing that we're not actually implementing code, except the name change? And we can, people can debate the name change. I'm sort of in the Hollister camp on the name change. But with regard to the resolution, where the meat of this is, it actually just empowers the Bureau to go out, follow the guidelines in the resolution, then come back to the council prior to any code. Knowing that, does that in any way alleviate your
yield for a question?
It's your time. I'm just musing publicly. I'm curious on about your feedback.
That's so fair. I just want to know if it is, and I'm not saying I disagree with anything in it, but why are we doing exactly what our federal government is doing by having this meeting as an emergency? So many things are being passed that we don't hear about in the media, and this could be one of those things, but if we do it right, then it won't be one of those things that people say, oh, if only I had known. And I feel like even Speaker Chloe is pushing the in-groups and out-groups, and to attack a white male because he doesn't look a certain way. Not all disabilities are visible, and I just want to address that. And for you to attack Mr. Submarine back here, I don't think was very fair, because as we were talking about with disabilities, not all disabilities are visible, and for you to assume that he is completely able-bodied and snap at him, I didn't feel it's very appropriate.
I didn't attack him, and I'm going to presume competence of everyone who comes before me with testimony.
I agree. I just think we should not push people into in-groups and out-groups more than they already are, because it does take a lot of courage to come up here and talk to you. And it's a little scary, if I'm being honest. And that's all.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, commissioners, cesspool directors. So,
not everyone gets that reference, Mr. Johnson.
It's so covered in the, I mean, all the media is so much running with Daryl Turner's cesspool remarks that I think everybody has to get it. And so, and that actually does relate to the neighborhood associations. You know, different people at different places like to say derogatory things about any of y'all, maybe particularly Ted or Choo Choo Charlie that came before him. But we have thousands of people sleeping on the street. We have a police association president who's terrified that some business is going to have poop on their doorway. The neighborhood association system is a part of that. Its brokenness is a part of that. When we talk about, we've had some talk about what are inclusive neighborhood associations and blah, 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 blah. And I don't know exactly the nature and scope of the process on this name change from ONI to OCCL. but something is needed. And when we talk about neighborhood inclusiveness, we need to actually have some facts, like, are 90% of neighborhood associations chaired, directed, boarded by people who are all above the median income and primarily white? Recently near Hazelnut Grove, there's been some community growth and experience about including highly poverty-affected people in the neighborhood association. So something is needed. We can embrace a new name, OCCL, and try and build inclusion if we are just resistant and saying, the city of Portland that has thousands of homeless people and that happen under the O&I scheme, let's just keep that. That doesn't make very much sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to, Mayor,
Commissioner Daly,
I'd
you
like
got
to ask Director Ree back up to the table. So, as is frequently the case, there is some misinformation and misunderstanding in this room. And I just want to make sure that we all have the facts, knowing full well that having all the facts does not mean that we will all be in agreement. But it's really important to me that when we have these conversations and debates, that we all have the same information. So, Director Ree, if you could just repeat the public process that the Bureau went through with the name change. And I'll just start by saying the name change has been in conversation for several years preceding my joining City Council.
So I won't be able to speak to all of those previous conversations, but you could actually look at a document from about 10 years ago called Community Connect that actually spoke to the reasons why Office of Neighborhood Involvement does not actually reach all Portlanders and that we actually need a more representative bureau. So you could, and I'm sure those conversations preceded even that. We made the announcement that there will be a public process for the name change in January. It was in January and February. We did an online community survey, which was covered by many, many sources, Portland Tribune, Willamette Week. We received many, many serious and not serious responses. And then we also held 2 focus groups to also in that same time frame, to which everybody in our database and our partners were invited to. So it and interestingly, many of the presenters here today who actually talk about the lack of process participated in those processes. They came to, they submitted things online, they came to the focus group, and then also we talked about it at every meeting that we had, whether it was the Bureau Advisory Committee or any other invitation that we received, including specifically the Goose Hollow Neighborhood Association. Thank you for inviting me to your meeting earlier this year, and I did come and attend. Northwest Neighbors also at the board meeting. We discussed it. I was invited, and also we discussed that. And so it is true, though, that not maybe 650,000 Portlanders all received that notice. Maybe they didn't read the Willamette Week. Maybe they did not read the Tribune. Maybe they did not get an email directly to them or forwarded to them or saw it on Nextdoor. But there was an open and public process to which many people did participate.
Second, about our renaming and rebranding. We actually spent a small fraction of what's typically spent on an effort like that, including other bureaus. So I'm actually very proud that we were able to achieve that with such a small budget. And it's certainly more than a pamphlet and a notebook. If you could just explain, sorry to put you on the spot, all of what Fort Wick did for us, because it involves all of our collateral, printed material, website, et cetera.
Right. It was Fort Wick was also a partner in actually some of the public outreach, handling the focus groups, but it's also synthesizing not just the input that we received in a limited time between January and May of this year, but also reviewing all our foundational documents and going back to other community reports, of which there are many, and synthesizing some of those community inputs. In addition, Fort Wick was Also provided a style guide, standard operating protocols, templates, and many back-end technical pieces of support that are involved with not only a new visual identity, but also introducing the concepts that the visual identity represents. I hope that answered your question.
That's actually more than, do you have a question on that? Because I have a couple more.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay.
But may I just ask one thing? That notebook, I just want to say, we were actually very modest in what we chose as collateral material. Those notebooks, for example, the reason why we chose notebooks is because people actually need them and use them, and we're going to be integrating them in the giveaways to families. We're thinking about all our collateral materials that could be actually useful to community members. So notebooks and pencils that could be part of back-to-school packages during National Night Out, which we hope to deliver to families and communities.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think finally, I just want to say, if my intention was to dissolve our formal ties and withdraw support of neighborhood associations, this is the time that we would be doing that. This rumor has been around since I took over the Bureau. It precedes your arrival at the Bureau, and it's been fomented by certain members of the media who have never actually asked me what my intention is. So now that it's on public record that I do not intend to burn down the neighborhood association system, although the more it was suggested that that was my intention, the more I thought maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. I would like you to state your feelings about our neighborhood association system and how you see them working with us as partners moving forward.
So we have said publicly many times, in writing, in person, many different ways, that no, there's no intention to dismantle neighborhood associations. And in fact, our recent efforts, many that you do not see behind the scene, and I wish could get covered in the media, is that we've only worked within the Bureau in the last several months to put our neighborhood program in a stronger connection with our other programs. Neighbors should receive the benefit of all of the programs that this Bureau provides, whether it's crime prevention. And actually, yesterday, I believe, our Portland United Against Hate program coordinator met with 8 or 9 neighborhood associations specifically around their efforts. We've been actually offering from our alternative shelter program outreach and invitations to work with neighborhood associations and coalitions addressing homelessness. We're asking all our programs to actually work and collaborate more together. No silo thinking, no single one-person programs. And in order to facilitate that, we actually moved our people. Our neighborhood program coordinator used to be in City Hall. Our crime prevention staff, 13 of them who actually work with neighbors in their neighborhoods and in neighborhood associations, were on the east side at our Kelly building. We actually physically moved our people so they could be co-located, so they could actually talk, think, work, and deliver services together. In addition, it wasn't just putting crime prevention and our neighborhood program back together. We actually also moved our whole community and neighborhood involvement center, which includes youth, disability, immigrant or refugees, and mental health, to be co-located so actually we can serve all Portlanders better through all our programs. And I would say, though, that do we have the capacity to actually deliver all our good work and all our great messages to everyone at once simultaneously? No. That's why we've fought for strategic communications as part of our request for organizational support this year. We received that. Thank you, Council, for doing that. And so intentional communications has not been a strength of the Bureau, and that is one area where we're trying to structurally address it for the future.
Thank you.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Yeah, Commissioner Daly, I think your line of questioning was similar to what I was going to ask Director Reed. Just, what is the end game here? And it's not to do away with geographic-based neighborhood associations. That's what I'm hearing both of you say.
Also, let me also share with you.
That's
Yes.
not part of the end game. Let's put it that
No.
way.
Also, I came up as a community organizer in my professional life, and I see the value of place-based work. I see the value of communities coming together for a host of different reasons. And also, there's nothing a bureau or city government can do when communities come together and they identify strongly with each other, are organized, have identity, are relevant and credible, and deliver good things for the city. There's nothing a city can do to prevent that, and we're going to do everything we can to support that.
Yeah, okay, and then the resolution speaks to coming up with a voluntary guidelines for best practices. And, you know, I've been around here long enough to know that ONE's been at best practices for at least the entire 20 years I've served here on city council. So my question is to make sure that these are intended to be voluntary best practice guidelines, not to migrate to some sort of criteria under which a district coalition might be funded by the Office of Community and Civic Life or something like that?
I'm sorry, can you restate? You just want to clarify there will be voluntary guidelines?
They will be voluntary.
Yes.
Like I said, you know, we've been at this a long time.
Right.
Cities always like to out best practice each other. And so I'm sure there's a whole wealth of data out there about what's a best practice. I guess I don't want to see that become sort of the an enforceable funding requirement or an enforceable rule on a district coalition in order to receive funding, that they must, you know, have A, B, C, D, E best practices. That's not where we're going here. This is
Actually, that's what we're trying to correct, sir. Right. Right now, we actually say you must have this type of board representation, follow this grievance process, et cetera. And so they are codified in the ONE standards and referred to in the code. So actually, we're trying to correct the situation and go toward what you're suggesting. Is that actually we have the wisdom of today, but we don't know what tomorrow brings. We actually could not have imagined Me Too, Black Lives Matter, Living Coley, Coalition of Communities of Color, many forms of the way that communities organized 20 years ago. So we are not trying to predict and prescribe. In fact, we're trying to say we will need to adapt continuously, and communities will determine the right methods and approaches and their own governance. And so we want to respect that. So we're actually trying to get back to, because they were once voluntary, best practices.
Okay. And then finally, I think it's Mr. Velke, he raised a good question. What happens when some organization that we don't like seeks our accreditation and approval and support and involvement and access to funds?
We don't currently do that now. Actually, the fact of the matter is that we, as a city, I would use the word recognize in quotes, we acknowledge everybody who comes, whether they're an individual or two people, a group, or larger. We don't have to affiliate, associate, endorse, invite in. There are many ways that the city currently says, we see you, but you cannot do this type of behavior in council chambers. We see you, we may agree with you, but you may not be the recipient of funding. Or we actually see you and we agree with you, and here's funding support, and it's limited to this scope of work. We currently do that right now all the time. The code change will actually get to more accurate reflection of reality, instead of pretending that we can only recognize one type of group at one certain time, and that is the extent of our ability to recognize. So did that answer your question?
I guess I had one final question, and that is, do you see any potential charter changes coming from the guideline review, or is that something that would have to be considered too, or are you looking at?
I'm not going to predict the wisdom of this very wise committee that will soon hopefully be convened.
Could I just acknowledge something? And I want to get one. I mean, as I say, I've read this resolution now, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. And my first reading of it was very non-offensive and very easy to get my arms around. And it requires a group of people to go out and consider the various issues and then come back to the council. I mean, that strikes me as non-controversial. But I think we have to go one level deeper here. And I really appreciated the gentleman who stood up and openly and frankly acknowledged fear of the unknown. And I was really interested to hear him say it in just that way, because as I've been thinking about what's going on in larger society, and we are a divided society, and people are really angry with each other, and I think a lot of it is fear, and it is fear of the unknown. And as we undertake this process, I want to be mindful that it is not a zero-sum game. By bringing new groups to the table and by broadening the net of inclusion, and I think that makes sense for a whole host of reasons, I think it's equally important that we say that the process is not a zero-sum game, and it will not be disrespectful of those who dedicate their time or their talent or their energy to the traditional neighborhood associations. If that's the way certain people would like to engage in their community, I'm all for it. And that's how we've done it since 1974, and by and large, it's been a successful process. We acknowledge Portland is changing. It is becoming bigger. It is a big city. It is becoming more diverse. There are more different ways that people would like to engage with the community, and you're broadening that net. But could you say something or demonstrate to those who have expressed concern that this is all coming at the expense of neighborhood associations? What can you say to allay their concerns?
Well, I would actually...
As I saw it as a both and, but clearly not everybody agrees with me in that interpretation.
I believe you're reading and interpreting the resolution as intended, Mayor. I don't know what actually I would like to hear. Honestly, I can say it's already been said. There's no intention to dismantle neighborhood associations. We respect many neighborhood associations, and we also respect all our community partners who come in a different way, shape, or form. The fear of the unknown, I don't know what to say to somebody because we cannot predict the future, and I do not know what that fear is based on. I don't know what they may have heard to be so fearful. But what I can say is, if you have not shared that directly with me, I invite you to. If you feel that the gentleman who talked about the end zones and wanted to be in the middle, if you fear that attempting conversations where we could all come to the middle is not possible, then I'm not sure what I can say to address that.
Let me throw an idea out, and this could be good or it could be bad. It's thinking on the fly, which is a dangerous proposition for me. A number of people talked about inclusion in the resolution process. Are there more opportunities for people to participate and have their voices heard?
Inclusion in the resolution process?
Yeah, because we are resolving that we're convening this code change committee. They go out and they will set the voluntary guidelines, et cetera, per the whereas be it resolved statement in the resolution. Is there opportunity for people to participate, to have their voices heard, to help shape that process?
Absolutely. I think it'll also be a multi-layered approach because many people will come to a meeting and many people will not. And so I believe there will be ways to participate online or maybe through existing formats and meetings. There will be intentional outreach events, and there will also be, but there will not be a committee of 650,000 people. So there will be a smaller group that represents a cross-section and of the diversity and who are interested. And I would also hope to attract people who currently, for whom this is not on their radar, but we would like for them to be interested in having this conversation.
How can they find that out? Where can they go? Is there a website where if somebody's just tuning in right now and they're like, this sounds interesting to me, where can they go?
Right now, there is not a website. We are taking it one step at a time. We would like the ordinance to be passed. We would like the resolution to be passed. And then we need to actually engage our team internally to actually propose the process. So at this point, contact the Office of, hopefully, Community and Civic Life. But the actual process and the portal for how to signify your interest, get more information is to come.
Okay.
So there is nothing hidden about a process that is yet to be revealed.
Can we at least commit that once that decision is made, it will be on the city website? so that people
of course,
who
that
would
is
like to access this.
of course. I'm sorry if it needs to be, of course. In the city of the PortlandOregon.gov website, of course, our Bureau website, and we're trying to build our capacity to actually get beyond our usual circles, which are people who tune into the city and the Bureau.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Colleagues, anything else? So we are going to vote on the resolution. We're going to hold off on the ordinance until Commissioner Fish can tune in at 4 p.m., which is 20 minutes. Commissioner Udaley, this is your show. We could either wait for both for another 20 minutes, or we could run the resolution now.
I think we could go ahead and run the resolution.
Very good. Carla, please call the roll on the resolution.
Saltzman?
Well, I'm pleased to support this. I think it's, there's a lot of reasons, I think, to have a fresh look at our guidelines and how we do business with our residents and our neighborhoods. I do believe there is, a continued role for geographic-based neighborhood associations, but I also think there's a lot of other community interests that are sort of knocking at the door to be as involved as many neighborhood associations are. And I think having a group look at some of the best practices or the guidelines is a good, healthy step that needs to be undertaken every once in a while. And I have confidence in Commissioner Udaley and Director Reed that they will conduct this process in an open manner, and that will involve all of the council as it progresses. Aye.
Udaley?
I'm going to go off script for a minute. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming and for testifying today. I want to apologize for the level of irritation that I reached a few minutes ago. It's hard not to get defensive up here sometimes, but when you get defensive, the first thing to go is compassion, and I really do strive to listen to everyone who comes here with compassion and try to reach understanding. That said, it's been frustrating, the amount of kind of misinformation being spread in public about this, and I've been surprised by some of the feedback that we've received, considering that this ordinance and resolution seem fairly non-controversial and are such a positive evolutionary step forward for our Bureau. I was given this Bureau by the mayor, not with edicts, but certainly with firm direction to address the issues that were brought to light by the audit. I've brought in new leadership. We've undertaken a reorganization. I think the climate of the Bureau is much more positive than it was 18 months ago, and I'm proud of the work that we've done. I also want to use myself as an example of how we're not serving all community members. As a mother of a child with a severe disability, I consider myself an honorary member of the disability community. And over the last 17 years, I have learned many hard, painful lessons about how ill-equipped our city and our communities are to receive people like my son. And at some point, I realized that it was perhaps unreasonable of me to expect the general population to understand the unique needs and challenges that people with disabilities face if they had no direct lived experience. It's a really complicated, disability in particular, very complicated. People have varying needs and varying abilities. And so I realized that part of my job as Henry's mom was to advocate for him and try to build understanding and acceptance and inclusion in the larger community. The goal being that one day the community is ready to receive people like my son and understand his needs and challenges. And I really feel that's what we're facing today across the city, but in particular ONI / Office of Community and Civic Life. Okay, now I'm going to switch to my prepared remarks so I don't forget anything. So if there's one thing I've learned so far in my role as city commissioner, it's that people like to talk about the need for change, but really don't like change very much when it comes down to it. And if there's another thing I've learned, it's that we really need to change. From creating a better work environment, to delivering better services and supports to the community, to setting more ambitious goals, to holding ourselves accountable for outcomes, this Bureau needed to change, and we are changing it. We have not been shy about admitting our weaknesses and have spent the last 18 months moving aggressively to implement the necessary reforms. The resolution and ordinance today move us closer toward our goal of having a Bureau that will strengthen the relationship between the city and all of its residents at a time when it is desperately needed. I absolutely believe, and this was quoted earlier actually, that citizens are the riches of the city, and want to express my gratitude to Portlanders who volunteer countless hours to help us govern more effectively, and that certainly includes everyone who's involved with their neighborhood associations. I feel obligated to acknowledge the mistakes and opportunities the city has already missed because of our inability to engage more of our constituents. Our current system, which has excluded renters, people of color, youth, immigrants and refugees, the disability community, and people with a diverse range of gender and sexual identity, is not just by default, but often by design. And this means that our systematic approach to addressing this inequity must happen by design, because it's not going to happen by default. We cannot afford to use public processes, which often fail to include many of these populations, to maintain the status quo. We as council members need to have the courage to say that we believe our Civic Engagement Bureau has a moral and practical responsibility to engage with and recognize all Portlanders, regardless of how they identify and organize. We need to be clear that this basic principle is not up for debate, so we can begin the hard work of paving the path forward together. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
I'm very pleased to support this resolution, and I'm appreciative of the testimony that we heard today. I think it raised some important and provocative questions. At the end of the day, the resolution for me is common sense. It's very straightforward. It seeks to increase and enhance representation, and it has a focus on those who have historically not been included in important conversations about what our city's strategies and priorities are and how resources are allocated. But my reading of the resolution is that it does not come at the expense of others. It, to me, is a more expansive vision of civic participation, inclusion, and democracy in our city. And it is not inconsequential that I think that also improves accountability of city government. To the degree that people don't feel engaged or they feel that decisions are being made without them and that they are not included, people start checking out. And as you look at democracy generally in America and even here in Oregon, what you see is even when it comes time to cast a vote for ballot measures or for individuals running for office, increasingly people say, why bother? We cannot have that happen at the community level. We cannot have that happen at the neighborhood level. This is collectively all of our community, and as somebody said earlier today, we need to open as many doors as we possibly can. And as I said earlier during the testimony, there is no way I can read this resolution as being anything other than a both-and solution as opposed to an either-or solution. And last but not least, Portland is and I've said this, and sometimes people actually think I'm just being Pollyannish, but I'm not. Portland is actually a city that is looked to as an amazing city, and the facts all bear that out. When you look at the economy, when you look at the companies that are moving here, when you look at the people who are moving here, young and old, and they're moving here for economic opportunity, and they're moving here for lifestyle, and we are growing and we are diversifying, and yet our neighborhoods are experiencing a lot of the growing pains. For those of us who've been in Portland our whole lives, the city has changed. It's changed dramatically. And some of those changes are really good and really positive. On the other hand, some of those changes are really jarring. We see increased poverty, increased housing and affordability, increased homelessness. We see strains on our infrastructure and strains on our civic infrastructure as well. And cities that will be successful are those cities that can navigate this change from being a smaller city to being a much larger, global, more complex city with all of the opportunities. And believe me, Portland is bristling with opportunities, but also with some of the boils that come along with that growth. And I think, as Commissioner Saltzman said, that it is time that we look at this structure that was originally created in 1974, take a fresh look at it and ask ourselves, how can we keep the things about the structure that we really like and that we appreciate? And for me, at the top of that list is engaging citizens in a meaningful way to bring their collective strengths, time, talent, energy, and passion to the table, and expand the circle of people who want to meaningfully participate in our city. In other words, it's about leverage. It's about leveraging the opportunity that exists by increasing the number and kinds of people who participate in helping our community to be successful. So I'm very proud to support this, Commissioner Udaley. I have complete confidence in your ability to carry this to fruition. Director Rhee, I thank you for the work you've done on this. But by virtue of the fact that this is a resolution, this isn't the end of the work. This is really the beginning of the work. It's the beginning of the brass tacks work and the hard work. And I think we had a good conversation today, and we got a diversity of viewpoints. And I know you will internalize those viewpoints and bring us back a great finished product. So I vote aye. The resolution is adopted. Thank you. So Commissioner Fish cannot join us for another 10 minutes. So what I will do is hold open item 771, and we will take that up again at 4 p.m. sharp. In the meanwhile, I'd like to go on to item number 765. And if we're lucky, maybe we can even get that wrapped up by 4 p.m. And if not, we'll just take a break in the middle of 765.
Accept proposal of Gresham Ford for mobile data computers for the Portland Police Bureau for an initial term of 5 years, not to exceed $2 million.
And just for the record, this item was moved from the AM agenda to the PM agenda for various reasons. It was noticed in the Tuesday memo, and we have Larry Plott here to walk us through. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you very much. And I'll get us through 765 and 766.
I'm sorry, Larry. And 766 was also moved from the AM agenda to the PM agenda. And we'll get to that in a minute. Thank you.
Okay, City Council, I'll do the short versions. City Council
I'm sorry, Larry, do you want them read at the same time? Are you suggesting?
That'd be
if you can do that,
fantastic.
that'd be great. Carla, can you read 766 then too, please?
766, accept bid of Corpat Construction Company for the Northwest 20th Avenue LID project for $4,012,488.
Sorry, Larry, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The Council for 765, Council passed Ordinance 187698 in April 2016, authorizing procurement service to do a competitive solicitation for mobile data computers, classified MDCs, which are installed in every police vehicle. The warranty for our current MDCs is in use expires in 2018, so there is an immediate need to get these done. We've been working at this for some significant amount of time. MDCs allow sworn staff to perform all administrative, communication, investigatory, and operations duties possible with technology while in their patrol districts. Since sworn officers don't have to return to the office to perform these job functions, they can spend considerably more time patrolling the streets, and they can respond faster to incidents requiring public property or citizen protection. In June 2017, Procurement Services advertised an RFP for MDC systems. 3 proposals were received and opened. All proposals were responsive to the solicitation requirements, therefore they successfully completed Phase 1. Phase 2 evaluations of the RFP consisted primarily of product demonstrations before the Evaluation Committee and the Committee of Technical Advisors, and of the 3 proposals, 2 moved forward to Phase 3. You can see why this took a long time. which consisted primarily of in-car testing. Both proposers submitted a prescribed number of units placed in active use vehicles, field tested for approximately 2 months. The GTAC units on Gamber-Johnson mounts were determined to be the best units proposed based on the criteria provided. All the proposals were evaluated at each phase by a team of diverse and qualified evaluators, including members of the city's Minority Evaluator Program. The city issued a notice of intent to negotiate an award to Gresham Ford for the GTAC MDCs on Gamber-Johnson mounts on March 26, 2018. No protests were received. Gresham Ford, the primary contractor for this contract, has a current City of Portland business tax registration account, is in full compliance with all of the city's contracting requirements. Gresham Ford is not a state-certified DMW ESB contractor. It is requested that the council approve this report and authorize the chief procurement officer to execute a contract with Gresham Ford for the GTAC MDCs on Gamber-Johnson mounts in an amount not to exceed $2 million. If the council has any questions concerning the facilitation of resulting contract, I can answer those. We do have Chad Lublin and Assistant Chief Davis in the chambers if there's specific questions about the units.
Well, let me dispose of this one first since we have people waiting. Is there any further question for Larry? I'll entertain a motion.
I would move the report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Carla, please call the roll.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Report's adopted. And then to 766.
766. You have before the procurement report recommending a contract award to Corpac Construction for the Northwest 20th Avenue LID project, the amount of $4,012,488. The engineer's estimate of the project was $4,057,116, and their confidence level was moderate. Council passed ordinance 188244 to solicit the project. Project was advertised in electronic procurement system. 6 bids were received in response, and Corpac Construction is the lowest responsible bidder at $4,012,408, which is 1.1% under the engineer's estimate. Corpac Construction, acting as the prime contractor, identified traffic control, signage, electrical, and concrete as opportunities for subcontracting. There is a total of $927,083, 23.1% of identified DMW ESB subcontractor participation for the project. There are 4 firms, 4D and 1M firm providing this $927,000. The prime contractor, Corpac, is a State of Oregon certified DMW firm and is performing $2,344,473, or 58.43% of the work, bringing the total participation of certified firms to $3,271,826, or 81.53%. Corpac Construction is located in Portland, Oregon. They are a state-certified DMW ESB contractor. They have a current City of Portland business tax registration. They're in full compliance with the city's contracting requirements. If the council has any questions concerning the bidding process, I can answer them. Because we are so far above the city's aspirational goal of 20%, we did not ask either the Bureau or the contractor to be in chambers.
Move adoption of the report.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Saltzman, a second from Commissioner Udaly. Please call the roll.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The procurement report is accepted. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it very much. Do we have Commissioner Fish yet? And colleagues, if you don't mind, after we do that, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. 5-minute recess. I'm out of water and coffee.
Yeah. And cough drops.
Commissioner, are you there? Okay, thank you.
All right, great. So we have 771. Carla, could you just reread that, please, for us?
Yes. Rename the Office of Neighborhood Involvement to the Office of Community and Civic Life.
Carla, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I think you need to read the script about taking telephone.
You are correct.
First.
Thank you. Thank
Sure.
you. That's why we have legal counsel, so that I don't create a disaster. Pursuant to PCC 3.02.025, Commissioner Fish is participating by telephone because he's been attending a medical appointment. Failure to allow participation of the city council member by electronic communication would jeopardize the public interest, health, safety, or welfare. Commissioner Fish is also not physically present, but his office was contacted and he was given an opportunity to participate by telephone today. I see how you all tried to trip me up on this script. Do any of the council members who are physically present object to having Commissioner Fish participate by telephone? I see no objections. Do we have Commissioner Fish? Legal counsel, yes.
One more thing. It's Commissioner Fritz is also not available, and we need to state for the record that her office was contacted and she
Oh, so you weren't gaming me.
We
Okay,
were not
got it. I thought
gaming
you were
you.
trying to trip me up. I thought this was like, you know, one of those news roll things where they try to stick things in and screw up the reporter. Commissioner Fritz is also not physically present, but her office was contacted and she was given an opportunity to participate by telephone today. Good lawyering. Thank you. Great. So we have Commissioner Fish on the phone, correct?
Correct.
All right, it's good to hear from you, Commissioner Fish. Thank you for joining us. Carla has read 771. Carla, please call the roll.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaly?
Well, I want to thank my colleagues for working with me today to get this heard and voted on, especially Commissioner Fish. I vote aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you, Commissioner Fish.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, we will be in recess for 5 minutes.
authorize limited tax revenue bonds to provide up to $18.3 million to finance tenant space build-out and furnishings in the Portland building.
Colleagues, this is a non-emergency ordinance that authorizes the city to issue up to $18.3 million in limited tax revenue bonds to fund tenant space build-out and furnishings for the Portland building and to pay bond issuance costs. As you know, in March of 2017, the Council approved Resolution 37274, directing the Office of Management and Finance to implement a plan for space optimization in the Portland building. The reopening of the Portland building offers the opportunity through space design and flexible furnishings to accommodate more employees in the building, thereby reducing external leasing costs. The financing plan for the space optimization project calls for the issuance of interim financing followed by takeout financing upon completion of the building. Debt service costs are expected to be included in the space rental rates charged to occupants of the Portland building. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric Johansson, debt manager. I think you've captured the essential aspects of this ordinance. I would note that the amortization period for these improvements will be less than the building as a whole, since the useful life of the assets is probably going to be something around 7 years, so we'll just amortize it a little bit shorter.
Good. Any red flags we should be aware of?
I don't think so.
Very good. Colleagues, any further questions? Commissioner Saltzman?
Yeah, I was just curious, does this 18.3 million count as part of the 195 million total price tag for the Portland building?
In addition to the
It's in addition to?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that was a brief presentation. Any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up now. They've
We
left.
could have taken a 10-minute break on this one. Thank you, and while we're moving very quickly to pass this to second, I just want to acknowledge your work, Eric, in the Debt Management Division, but also I want to acknowledge OMF and Chief Administrative Officer Tom Reinhardt as well, who's been working very closely with you. And the watchword here is to make sure that we are being very effective with the renovation costs of this building. And the space optimization program is critical to that. And we've worked really hard to use the space that we have there as efficiently as possible. And you just heard the reason why. Given the cost of commercial lease space in Portland right now, particularly in the central city, the more employees that we can comfortably and reasonably get into the Portland building, the better. And that has to do both with capital construction and engineering design, as well as how we actually facilitate the workstations and other public spaces in that building, and I want to thank you for your diligence on that. So this is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading next week, July 25th, 2018. Thank you. Item 774.
Amend Joint Office Homeless Services Intergovernmental Agreement with Multnomah County to authorize fiscal year 1819 budget allocation to the Joint Office of Homeless Services.
So, colleagues, many times items are brought forth that may go relatively unnoticed by the public that underscore our commitment to providing homeownership counseling, homeownership and rental stability, and educational opportunities associated with each. The contracts brought forth today reiterate that commitment with our community partners that the City of Portland will continue to work towards providing counseling and educational opportunities for those who look to rent or want help on assessing how homeownership may be a possibility in our city. And I look forward to the Portland Housing Bureau continuing to work with our community partners on this. Today, we have, it looks like, a very top-flight panel to discuss this with us, including Interim Housing Director Shannon Callahan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor. I apologize. Carla, may I ask what number was just read? It is 770?
774.
And that is the...
Amend Joint Office of Homeless Services IGA ordinance.
Okay, perfect. And Mayor, you also, I think, talked a little bit about our next item, which is 775, which is authorizing the sub-recipient contracts. So if I might, I think Christian Elkin and I will talk to 774 briefly.
Good.
Which is the third year of the Joint Office IGA, in which the city will be transferring more than $34 million over to the county for the joint efforts on the homeless service system. Notably this year, the resources will be increased specifically for 3 different areas, one of which is more resources to transition individuals out of shelters and into permanent housing, more supportive housing services, more funding for shelter alternatives, and as well as shelter capital. Christian Elkin is here from the Joint Office Budget Office to be able to answer or address any questions you might have.
Thank you. Commissioner Daly?
Why are you looking at me?
What are you going to do with all that money? No.
It's been a long day, y'all.
Great. Any public testimony?
Yes.
Great.
We have 3 people signed up.
Good. Please, let's hear from them. Save us.
Okay, we need John Hollister,
Thank you.
Shedrick Wilkins. Oh, I think Charles left. So just the 2, John
Okay,
Hollister
thank you.
and Shedrick Wilkins.
Thank you both for your patience. We're trying to catch us up here, as you can probably tell. Mr. Hollister, would you like to go first, please?
Sure. Okay, here. My name is John Hollister, and this whole homelessness thing is just an area. Actually, I'm going to be spending some time, Commissioner Udaley, with your chief of staff to talk about that. And we had a spirited conversation on the phone that's saying, giving homeless people a home does not solve the problem. And I have personal experience in that. I have never been homeless, but I have 2 of the other big problems. I am an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I have mental health issues. And I am very fortunate to have 32 years of AA sobriety. But in that 32 years, for 21 years, I was continually misdiagnosed for my mental illness, and actually given medications that actually accentuated my bipolar. And once at 21 years sobriety, when I was properly diagnosed and given the correct medication, then it didn't do the work for me, but it put my brain in a brain chemistry that made me stable enough to be able to do the work to continue on my recovery and my spiritual journey. The problem that, as I have gone around now and I'm sitting down and I'm talking to homeless people, and 2 come up as I spoke to Joy in the North Pearl Blocks, who is this absolute wonderful person, talks about the being beaten and on the streets and things like that, and all of her things being stolen, and just a wonderful human being, and just talking to her. And then I talked to Jake, and Jake was running around swearing and things like that, and I learned on a way to de-escalate by putting my hands up and said, Jake, or I didn't know his name at that time, I go, is there anything I can do to help? And he said, they stole my cell phone. They stole my cell phone. He was very well spoken and put together great sentences and things like that. It was the cafe that stole his cell phone. And I go, tell me more. And then he kind of shifted and says, I have an army of 600,000 Mexicans that at a snap of my finger are going to be here and kill everyone in the building and their families. And I thanked him for the heads up. And but there's our problem. And in my next testimony on the next subject, I'm going to talk about the problem that 52% of our arrests are for homeless. It's not a police problem. It is the problem that they're doing that and they're arresting him because there are not enough public health officials and people trained, and they're not funding that because we can't give more money there. So more on that in a moment. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Good. Good afternoon, sir.
Okay, I'm Cedric Wilkins, and I'm kind of distraught today because I have a daughter, and when she was 20 years ago, when she was 1 year old, she had bladder cancer. And she was given X-ray radiation for cancer. And in England, they would have not done that. So England, and I've heard this, I talked last year to somebody said, and they came from England, a staff person, they don't do X-ray radiation on children either. They rely on chemotherapy. My daughter is breaking down. She's 21 now, and well, she'll be 21 next month. And she has to have a permanent catheter. So she's breaking down, but I have asked her if she would like to come down here and try to do her hand at public speaking. Now, I want to tell you about my daughter. My daughter was a spokesperson for Measure 50, the cigarette tax for kids that failed. When she was 10, she stood right near, she was on Oregon TV for a month. And she was standing right near Governor Ted Kulongoski, who said Measure 50 was a failed first step. She was on Oregon television. It was my idea that she auditioned for it because she's a cancer survivor. And she got to say all children have the right to see a doctor, regardless of income. And then 3 years later, Oregon, Ted Kulongoski, governor, said it's a failed first step. In 2010, the first time I ever talked in City Hall, we developed the term healthy kids, which covers 80% of all children, except for non-residents. Now, the legislature may have solved that last year with coverall, but we still have healthy kids. And so it's kind of funny for me to think that in 10 years, I did accomplish something by asking her to audition. And she inspired me to get up here and talk, right? And I am kind of curious to know what will happen. I think she permanently cannot work and should be on SSI. But in the wintertime, if she's sleeping in the open, she could die. And I'm talking about the Joint Task Force because I like to talk. My ex-wife doesn't. So I like to talk. And sometimes, just like healthy kids, it works. I can talk and my daughter can talk on TV and things can get going. And so I want to just say that I've talked to Commissioner Fritz about it because she's into children's issues. So I want to make sure she doesn't freeze to death. She'll probably go on SSI, and I doubt she can ever work, and she has to wear a permanent catheter. And she'll be all right now if she was walking around, but the weather's okay. Also, I'm 50 feet from the Pearl District shelter that they may make this fall. 50 feet my HUD apartment is. There, I was homeless for a year, and because of my age, I'm on special programs with my job.
We appreciate your perspective and wish your daughter the very best. And I'm sure with you as her dad, she's got great support.
I believe in talking. It's good to talk. Don't sit there, try to talk to somebody like Commissioner Fritz talk and get them going.
Get it going. All right, thank you. We appreciate that. This, of course, is an emergency ordinance, so please call the roll.
There's not enough. This is going to be.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. We're going to put this off until next week. We'll move this as. Do we need? We don't need to vote to take the emergency off. We can simply move this to second reading. Correct, legal counsel?
Correct.
Good. So we'll do that. We'll move this to second reading. Just to clarify what this is. This is, of course, the IGA between the City of Portland and the Joint Office of Homeless Services. This is actually where we move the funds that were already discussed, deliberated, and voted on during the budget process. And there's also some technical changes in there as well.
One clarification, you
Yes.
said it's a second reading. It's, as an emergency, it is not considered a second reading. We're just continuing for a vote.
The discussion. Thank you. The same will be the case with item 775.
authorize 11 subrecipient contracts totaling $4,190,763 for services in support of providing affordable housing.
So, colleagues, this time my talking points will in fact match the ordinance that we are discussing. The Portland Housing Bureau uses city and federal funding sources to provide a variety of services through subcontracts with nonprofit agencies every budget year. The contracts authorized by this ordinance will be funded from the PHB adopted budget passed on May 16th, 2018. These sub-recipient contracts will provide the following types of services to low and moderate income residents of the city of Portland: home buyer education and counseling, foreclosure prevention counseling, home repair, including emergency home repair, accessibility upgrades and energy efficiency improvements, healthy home classes, home retention strategies, legal aid services for low-income renters to keep them in their housing situation, renter education, outreach, and advocacy, again for the same purposes, relocation for households experiencing environmental hazards. With us today is the Housing Program Coordinator, Dana Ingram, but we also have the Interim Housing Director, Shannon Callahan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Council, we are both just here to answer any questions you may have regarding these subcontracts.
Colleagues, any further questions? Very good. This, do we have any public testimony, Carla, on these items? I think
Yes,
Mr.
one
Hollister.
person, John Hollister.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Hollister, and I know it's been a long day for all of you. I am just in favor of everything that supports all of the aspects of affordable housing and for being able to help people get off the streets. And I'm just going to make my one comment about some of the unfortunate press that all of you receive so much in your job, and I cannot imagine having a job where 60% of the constituencies hate you, and that still means it's a landslide because 60% like you. I can't imagine having that situation. So I am so impressed, and you know, and especially Dan, you for being so long in this position to be able to put up with that for so long and be able to hang in there. Thank you so much for your service. And Ted, you really distressed me in your article. Even the thought that you're not going to go for re-election, that's unacceptable to me. And I will fight you on that one to the end. I really think that the city needs you, and I think you are a great fit. These attacks on you in the newspaper, when somebody attacks you on something you said in a newspaper article, and that's the basis of their attack, give me a break. And to be able to turn something around and say that you don't support the police because you said 52% of the arrests are, that's a problem, that they're homeless. It is a problem, but that for them to immediately assume that you were throwing them under the bus is absolutely, in my mind, ridiculous. And once again, I just, honor you so much to be able to stand there and continue to do that. And so I challenge anyone to say that, well, let's just say, that's enough. That's all I got.
Thank you. And just so people are aware, I wasn't making any announcements about running or not running, and I appreciate your very gracious comments. I'll just take the blame for not being very precise in how and what I say things sometime. I've been mayor for a grand total of 18 months, and it is premature for people to ask me if I am running for re-election. There's no reason for them to assume I am not, but this is a decision that I will make with my family and others when the time is right, and the time is not right for, in my opinion, at least a year.
Yeah.
And probably longer. And so I really just didn't spit it out very eloquently.
Well, I want to be able to
appreciate
do
your
whatever I
comments.
can in the next year to make sure you have some more fun, because that seems to be lacking.
Yeah, you know, and that's another thing. The reporter got it exactly right. He quoted me exactly right.
Yeah.
And the question kind of was, I don't remember the exact question, but it was some iteration of how are you doing? And I said, well, I wouldn't necessarily say with a straight face I'm having fun. The job's not fun, but it is meaningful.
Yes.
And for me, the whole point is the meaningful part is what makes it worthwhile, not that I'm here to be entertained there's other things I can do for fun in my spare time. But then when you attach it to a headline that, Ted Wheeler says job isn't fun, wow, 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 or whatever sort of the claims vast success. When I've only been here 18 months in my first term, I really lost the narrative on that, and it just, I have nobody to blame but myself. I need to be very clear and very precise and very to the point in what I say.
Well,
and then, I appreciate your graciousness.
Yes, and the last thing in your article, when you said that anyone that expects me to be able to solve homelessness, they're going to be sorely disappointed. And because Ted Wheeler by himself cannot solve homelessness. And I think that there are so many people that I talk to that are so willing to throw barbs, and yet when I ask them, what are you willing to do to help, they ends the conversation pretty quickly.
Yeah,
so
we can make good progress.
We can make great progress.
The spirit of collaboration and action that you have brought to this chamber repeatedly is exactly what we need. I mean, first of all, we can build civic pride. We can build on that civic pride. We can bring the private sector and government, the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors, the faith sectors together, and we're doing that.
Absolutely.
And we're executing on strategies that I know over the long term will show good results. Can we do more? Sure. And your call to action is exactly the right one. We've talked about the problem. Now it's really, we've identified the problem. Now let's talk about the solution and what everybody can do to help solve it. And that's where I am.
Yeah, and I believe in this current state that you guys can't do more unless we're willing to do more. If we do more, then you can do more. But I personally need to step up, and I plan on recruiting others to do the same.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's an all hands on deck situation for sure. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
All right, so this then we will also continue the emergency ordinance to next Wednesday, July 25th, regular agenda. 776, if you could read that, we're going to bring it back. Actually, do we need to read? Go ahead and read it just so we're fine.
Sure. Authorize 12 subrecipient contracts totaling $4,323,463 for services in support of providing affordable housing.
So, colleagues, I'm referring this back to the mayor's office. This was a bureau error. It was noticed in the public in the Tuesday memo. Item 776 is now obsolete. It's a prior version of the ordinance that we actually just heard, item 775. So that one is disappearing. 778, please.
Authorize contract with GSI Water Solutions, Inc. for CERCLA and risk assessment technical assistance at the Portland Harbor Superfund site for $500,000.
Commissioner Fish requests that this item be moved to August 15th, 2018 on the regular agenda without objection. Item 779.
Authorize contract with GSI Water Solutions, Inc. for source control technical assistance at the Portland Harbor Superfund site for $300,000.
Commissioner Fish also requests that this item be moved to August 15th, 2018 on the regular agenda without objection. Item 768.
Authorize a 5-year lease agreement for office space located at 1001 Southwest 5th Avenue to accommodate increased staffing and operations of the Bureau of Transportation, estimated at an average annual cost of $612,500.
Commissioner Saltzman or right to staff?
I'll turn it over to staff.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Pauline Goebel. I'm Property Manager in the Office of Management and Finance in the Facilities Division, and I'm here today with Ken Kinoshita, sorry about that, with the Portland Bureau of Transportation. He's here to answer any questions you may have regarding financing and budgeting questions. So Property is currently assisting PBOT with their property search in the downtown core area for their space needs related to increased staffing in the parking operations, regulatory and private for hire operations, and business operations.
Can you tell me how many square feet you're looking for?
About 13,000 square feet.
13?
Or it might be 16,000. 16,000, thank you.
16,000 square feet, and what are the basic requirements of that space? As you go about a search, what are the criteria?
Well, we're looking for commercially reasonable rates and terms to PBOT. So they required it be near the Portland Building and City Hall, so the downtown area, because they have, bureau, they want to have that consistency with the bureaus that are going to be going back to the Portland Building, which the Portland Building restack can't accommodate this need. Their need is immediate and long-term, so we're looking at 5-year leases with occupancy in the fall.
Very good.
So.
Okay, great, thank you. Any
Okay.
further questions?
You said a 5-year lease?
It would be a minimum of 5, it's a 5-year lease, yes, with an
Minimum,
option to
okay.
renew of 5 years.
Right.
Right.
Very good.
One option.
Is there any testimony on this item, Carla? Very
No
good.
one signed up.
Very good. So we'll, unless there's anything else, we'll continue the emergency ordinance to next Wednesday, July 25th, the regular agenda. Thank you both.
you.
I was giving you some cheap free advertising. So unless I got it wrong, we are done with our agenda today.
Correct.
Very good. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.